Here's the amazing thing, man. We were talking about how our religious perspective influences the way we answer moral questions, and we were talking about it kind of at a superficial level, right? Like why eating animals is viewed as morally permissible in Christianity versus why eating some animals might not be viewed that way in Hinduism. But there's an even more fundamental way in which our religious perspectives play a huge role in whether we view things as right or wrong. And the reason why is because if you acknowledge that your moral senses are telling you at least some things are wrong, regardless of people's opinions.
Sure.
The question, of course, is why?
Yeah.
Like, why is murder wrong? Why is rape wrong? Why is genocide wrong? Why is torturing babies wrong, regardless of what people think? And it's on that point that I think morality offers us a pretty amazing insight into reality. And you can tell me what you think of this before you go. I'm so sorry. I'm probably keeping you for something important right now. But when we think about moral values like love and justice and mercy and things like that, it seems like moral values can only exist in a person.
Right.
Which means that whatever the standard for moral values is, whatever we're referring to say that's what's morally good. Whatever the standard for moral values is, seems like it's got to be a person of some kind.
Sure.
Some kind of transcendent person.
Sure.
And similarly, when we think about moral laws, these things that we're required to do or forbidden to do, like I'm forbidden from killing other people and eating them.
Yeah.
Right. I'm required to treat other people the way I want to be treated. Moral laws also make the most sense if there's some kind of person, transcendent person, that's requiring us to do certain things and forbidding us from doing other things, right? And those are obviously two big parts of what many people consider God to be.
Right.
This transcendent person that is himself the standard for moral values.
An embodiment, a personification.
Yeah, like he's the reference point, as some would say.
Sure.
For moral values. His character is the reference point for moral values. That love is good because that's what he is. That justice is good because he is just.
Sure.
Right. And so moral values seem to point us to a transcendent person of some kind, and similarly, moral laws, seem to make the most sense with some kind of, transcendent moral lawgiver, right? And so that's, I think, a pretty, I think, that something like what many people conceive of God to be is the best explanation for why some things are right or wrong, regardless of opinion.
Yeah, but the thing with that is, like, again, like different places have different gods that believe in different things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were to then the question becomes, I think every person has a different God, right? Like everybody, like nobody views
different
God the same way.
conception of God.
Right?
I gotcha. Yeah, you might be right about that.
With like, even in terms of like, you take like the Islamic God versus the Christian God versus like maybe the Hindu God.
Yeah.
You would need some way to distinguish between them, which gets to something that's even more fundamental.
Yeah.
Which then maybe that's God, like whatever you can use to determine what's the right God. And in regards to something like Christianity or even Islam, a lot of things in the Bible, like slavery is like
permitted.
Yeah, in the Bible. We wouldn't view that as very acceptable today, right?
Yeah.
Like in a way, I guess you could say like modern morality is basically expanding the rights like God gave to the Israelites to like everyone.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, man, I think you're correct that this line of reasoning only gets us so far, right? I don't think it gets us to the God of Christianity or the God of Islam or the God of Judaism or the God of any particular religion. All I think this gets us to is some kind of transcendent person that's the standard for moral values and the moral lawgiver. And therefore, you could also say must be just as eternal and unchanging as morality itself. I think you could say that. And I mean, there are some other things you can infer about this being, right? If this being is the standard for moral values, then that means that this being is everything morally good, right? This being must be loving and just and patient and faithful and compassionate and merciful, right? And everything morally good. And I think we can also know a fair amount about what this person's required of us, right? That we seem to have a sense that we're required to act justly, right? To love our neighbor as ourselves, right? That we're forbidden to murder, we're forbidden to rape. It's almost like this being's made his law known in our hearts, right? Even made himself known in a sense in our hearts. Yeah. But I don't think you can go much further beyond that, just following that line of reasoning. I think you would need something else to be able to say that this transcendent personal being we're talking about here is actually the God of Christianity
Sure.
or the God of Islam or something else, right? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess it would just kind of go back to like people can disagree on what that god entails,
Mm,
and then you would need some way to differentiate between all those different gods
mm-hmm,
that people come up with, right?
mm,
And then, you know, I think like you can get rid of like religious things, but I don't know if everyone would necessarily agree on um, the most on like what that embodiment would be necessarily.
mm.
Maybe
By
some
that,
people
by
view
that
it
you
as
mean like what exactly?
I think like in a way you could argue that like the only real thing that matters is like force, right?
Mm,
That's an interesting argument I've actually heard.
mm,
The only reason like the Nazis are viewed as bad and we're viewed as the good guys is because we won the war, right?
mm,
If the Nazis won the war, they'd probably be viewed as the good guys, and then that transcendent moral being would, hate the Jews,
mm.
right? Or hate certain ethnic groups. So I think, and then at a very fundamental level, how would you differentiate between that God and our God and say, well, which one is the right one? If you were
Yeah,
to look
I
at
see
it
what
as
you're
from
saying.
like no social conditioning,
Mm-hmm,
view it from a perfectly like third party
mm,
objective lens,
mm-hmm.
how could you possibly be able to differentiate between those two groups of people?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, and it's definitely true, right? That our views of morality can be warped and shaped, at least in part, by by the culture and the society and the perspective that we're brought up in, right, indoctrinated in. But for what it's worth, the argument that we were just talking about, that's simply based on the fact that our moral senses tell us at least some things are right or wrong, regardless of people's opinions.
Sure.
And the best explanation for that, I think, is something like what many people conceive of God to be, right? A
Yeah.
transcendent person that's the standard for moral values and the moral lawgiver. And you might debate, whether this God is the God of any particular religion, and what this God's view is on modesty and sexuality and things like that. But it doesn't change it doesn't impact the argument that we were discussing, at least,
Sure.
which is simply based on something I think pretty much all of our moral senses tell us, right?
Yeah.
That the wrongness of the Holocaust is not just a matter of opinion. It's
Sure.
not merely a social construct, right? It's wrong regardless of what people think.
Sure.
Why? Well, I think that gives us a pretty amazing insight, personally,
Yeah.
into the nature of reality itself, right?
Yeah, but again, I think the problem with that would just be like, why can't we extend that to animals? Well, like, at
Mm,
what point does that extension sort of break down? Like, I think there's a
and
lot
by
of
extension, you
people,
mean what? I'm sorry, I'm trying to understand. You say why
um,
can't we extend that to animals? You mean
like, well, okay, so basic, very fundamental things that we all agree on, and we could probably say
hmm
murder, rape,
yeah,
things like these,
hmm
bad, right?
right,
No, regardless of like circumstance.
hmm
But then you get into, well, even the Nazis extended that to Germans, Aryans,
hmm
whatnot,
hmm
right? They didn't extend that to Jews, right?
hmm
Well, now we win the war. We're extending that to everyone, all humans on the planet, right?
hmm
Well, if that's was objectively like, I think that was the right choice, right?
hmm
But how can you prove that it's only that we stop at humans? And let's say hypothetically, right? We brought back like this like lineage of ancient beings, right? Like this like slow like evolutionary like track of people from like from like our common ancestor with chimpanzees
hmm
all the way to today, right? At what point, like how far back would you go that you say, okay, these people deserve these get rights, and beyond this point, they don't deserve rights. Like
hmm
you're not gonna put maybe you put a person to death for killing another human being. No one would say put a person to death for very few people would say put a person to death for killing like a chimpanzee, right? At
hmm
what point in like human like evolutionary I guess like in the human lineage can we make that distinction, or maybe it's like a gradual transition
hmm
where it's like, okay, like your life sentence like goes down and down and down as further
yeah.
back you go.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, honestly. Yeah, I mean, I don't think like if you're accepting like the kind of the evolutionary view of human origins, I don't know at what point you would demarcate. At
Yeah.
this point, it's wrong to kill another human being, but before that, it's basically like an ape killing another ape, right?
Right.
But I don't think it really. Do you at least see what I'm saying? That it doesn't really have any relevance to the argument that we're talking about here, which is that our moral senses tell us that at least some things are wrong regardless of
Sure,
people's
sure.
opinions. They're wrong now regardless of people's opinions.
Sure.
And the best explanation for that is something like God.
Um, I think the best explanation for that is just over time, humans that didn't think like that died out. Their genes weren't put back into the gene pool.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, so that would be a way of explaining why we came to believe this. But that's not a way of explaining why these beliefs are true. Like, we might be able evolutionarily to explain how we developed our eyes.
sure.
But that's different than explaining why, why the external world is
But I
real. Like,
think
right?
so I think like the initial I think this kind of like is almost like a circular argument